pardon the noise, but I'm out in the shop. It's about probably 10 degrees outside, so I got that thing going so I can use my propane tank so the forge over. But I have these tapers that I started forging a couple months ago to make this guard. And what I'm going to do is, they're pretty much to the right shape. I'm just going to clean up some of the roughness, and this one's really wonky and he's too long. So I'm going to forge them out a little straighter, and then I'll come in with a cutoff wheel and sculpt the piece that I want. It's just as fast, and I don't have much propane anyway. I'll be needing to get some more. And then I'm going to forge out enough 5/8 inch stock, the right width, to make this block in the middle and the end piece on each one. It's kind of interesting because of the way these go on. I make two identical sides, then they will naturally oppose. 1045. Might be wondering why I'm not using the hydraulic press. And the simple answer is it's too cold for the air compressor to work without the NIPCO running on it, and it's too cold for the propane tank to work without the NIPCO on it, and they're across the room from each other. So I get to beat this out by hand. Interesting for you guys to see this real time. I've got multiple pieces in the forge. This is how it works. Swinging constantly. I've got the bars forged out. Now I just got to grind them shiny on one side. It warmed up to 24 degrees, so I was actually able to use the hydraulic press. That helped a lot. Like I said, I'm going to shine up one side of each of these. Then I'll cut the, where'd the paper thing go? Oh, okay. And then I'll cut my paper pattern into the three pieces. These three pieces are separate. Of course, the points go on those, and the flats go on these. You know, that piece and then that piece. That shape would be ridiculously hard to forge because it's beveled, of course, both ways here, and it's also beveled, kind of sculpted, kind of, you know, curved, contoured is the right word on these two planes. So I have to kind of make them three pieces and then TIG weld them together and then blend out the TIG welds. I mean, it's from a society that has a little cupboard in the wall where you can ask for a cup of tea, then put the cup back, and it makes it into something else. So welding on this one is completely, I mean, it's almost, on a Star Trek or Klingon piece, welding is almost as primitive as the forging is for us. So maybe even more so. So that's kind of fun to break away from traditional things where someone might scoff at me for having a gas forge, for the, you know, using it, or an electric belt grinder instead of a file. The welder is totally okay on this build. But we've got to do something about the carbon monoxide content in here. I've got to get that oil furnace hooked up. I'm looking at YouTube videos on how to do it. There's a few wiring components kind of laying around inside that I've got to learn what they are and how they work and figure out how to wire it into the wall and test fire it, make sure it works, then use the right fitting to go through that hole in the wall. Hopefully it'll all work out for me. I have a couple HVAC friends that I'm going to be calling on that one. Then I'm going to take a piece of 1/4-inch steel and maybe some wooden blocks and kind of simulate the blade. I don't want to drill holes in it yet to get my hole spacing and slot spacing right for the blade blank so that the actuator can work everything. It's complicated and time consuming, this part. Well, I've got all the parts to 120 grit finish. I figured I'd polish them in this state so that when I've got it TIG welded up like this, I don't have as much to do to make the backside flat and all that stuff. Because this is a lot more difficult to polish up on the belt grinder than these larger pieces. So now what I'm going to do is take this pair of scissors, cut these little shapes out, lay them on these other shapes, trace them out. And I also, while I was on the sander, gave myself a pretty decent straight back edge for the purpose of making the little square sections. It's probably more material than I needed, but if I screw something up, I at least have a little wiggle room. Well, not really. Not a whole lot, but that's okay. We won't screw up. Start by cutting this guy out. Piece. There's my other pieces. Now, what we are going to do is first of all take it on this piece, and do I have a square? Of course not. Why would I have a square? That would be actually something useful. Okay. So, I'm going to use since I used a square to draw it, we'll just go like this. And that way we'll eliminate a lot of the yucky. That's not a very good scratch line. We need more, bigger marker deal. There we go. No. That's a silver one. Really? You gotta be kidding. Well, we'll use red one. Okay, we'll use a red one. Okay. There's one line. Now if we go like this, we kind of stick him flush to the back edge. And then we trace them along here. Yep. And then we're going to go over quite a ways to give myself room for the cutoff disc. I'm marking both of those. both of those now. And now we want to get both of these guys in. While still conserving. Yes, this is still relatively straight clear up to here. So that's what we'll work off of. Yeah. Of course, if a guy had a CNC mill, he could do this really easy. Yes, now that, we're going to go like this back a little farther again, once again, just because we want enough room for mistakes, if they should indeed happen. Now, the debate is, do I guess at the hole for the pivot right now and just kind of stick it in there, or do I try to give myself some wiggle room? The nice thing about putting a pivot down there now is that I can drill it while it's flat. That's the idea anyway. Now these, it's in my best idea to go. That's a weird way to fit on there. Yeah, we want you kind of centered. We do. So maybe back a little farther on this one. I think all the way back maybe. Yep. Okay, of course I am TIG welding this, so I can do a little filling, but I'd rather not do any. I'd rather have a nice, relatively seamless cut. Oh no. Of course that one, I'm making dots on my other piece. Of course that's the way it would work. That one. Let me true this up a little bit off camera or on camera. Now I'm going to be cutting it up with a grinder anyway. So there's going to be some variance from the idea, from the main theory anyway. Now, as long as they're all facing the same way, because remember these go on opposite sides of the knife, which makes it pretty easy to actually make. If I made them to where they were backwards from each other, they'd look stupid on this particular design. Excuse me. Grinder dust on the craw there. Do my best, but I still breathe in a lot. When those respirators wear out, it's kind of, it's not griping about the brand or anything. It's just everything wears out. Now, let's grab the actual drawing here, if I have a copy of it still. And see about where that hole was supposed to be. Because if I'm not mistaken, here's the hole. Let's get my leather punch. I have a paper punch, but we'll use a leather punch. So if we're here, and we got the biggest one we own, we go center of the drawing, bear down, thing out. Now, take this piece, stick it on there, kind of line it up, flip it over, still kind of line it up. I don't know. Well, that would be why. Okay. Well, this would go here. Common engineering sense would say it gets moved a little bit. There we go. There's my hole. The hole. So now, please rip. Yeah, good. It ripped right. I'm going to go ahead and re-stick him back kind of on there where he was. We get this. And now this is where I'll drill the pilot hole at least. If not the actual like 3/16 hole. Okay. So there's those parts. Now the reason I say 3/16 hole is because we're to go our little gear. Track here is a 3/16 hole, so that will go there-ish. And then, so now tomorrow or in the next video, I'm going to cut these out with a abrasive blade, kind of grind them to shape, bevel them like inside here and inside there will be beveled so I can weld them onto the squares. And then I'll, of course, the cool part is, before I do that, these here, where's the side view? Side view. This one. Yeah, kind of. Oh, got burnt in it. If you look at them here, these are this section here is kind of swept and radiused, contoured. This is pretty much square on. So this is why I want to drill the hole possibly while it's flat, so that I can achieve this later and not have to worry about at least having a pilot hole in there. So I'm not trying to start it on a rounded circle. And then, let's see, because we're doing that, yeah, that should work. So I'll drill my holes, cut up my parts, contour them, bevel the insides of those, weld them together, and then we got to get a test plate so that I don't totally screw this up. There's a lot of work in this piece, if you can imagine. And then we'll figure out how far apart the holes go and the, let's see, and how deep and wide that slot needs to be for everything to fit. Yeah, that's where we're at right now.